I gave the 50,000 to Leo for his startup, Vanessa. Your daughter can just take out loans. Family helps family. My mother said this while sliding an empty bank book across the dinner table. It hit my water glass with a sharp clink. I looked at my brother's smirk and realized they had no idea I was already one step ahead. My name is Vanessa, and I am 34 years old. I have lived in the city my whole life. I work as a forensic accountant. Most people hear that and think I spend my day looking at boring spreadsheets. They think I am just a human calculator who does not have a life outside of numbers. That is exactly what my family wants to believe. They see me as the quiet one. I am the daughter who always shows up to Sunday dinner. I am the one who pays the bill when the group check comes. I am the one who fixed the roof on my mother's house last summer. I am the reliable one. I have always been the one they could count on to clean up their messes. But while they were looking at me as a bank, I was looking at them as a puzzle. I am a single mother to a 10-year-old girl named Maya. Maya is the light of my life. She is brilliant and kind. She wants to be an engineer one day. For the last 10 years, I have worked 2 jobs. I spent my days at a big accounting firm finding corporate fraud. I spent my nights doing freelance bookkeeping for small businesses. I saved every single penny I could. I did not buy new clothes. I did not go on fancy vacations. I did not even buy a new car when mine started making a loud rattling noise. I put every cent into a trust fund my father started for Maya before he passed away. It was supposed to be $50,000 by the time she turned 18. It was her ticket to a life where she would not have to work 2 jobs like I did. My father knew how my mother and Leo were. He knew they spent money like water. He told me to protect that fund with my life. My role in this family has always been the fixer. My mother is a woman who loves the finer things, but hates to work for them. She thinks she deserves a luxury life because she was once a local beauty queen. My brother Leo is the one they always praised. He was the athlete in high school. He was the one who was going to be a star. But Leo is lazy. He has started 5 different businesses in the last 5 years. All of them failed because he would rather spend the investment money on designer shoes and club tables than on inventory. My mother always covers for him. She tells the rest of the family that he is just a visionary who has not found his niche yet. She looks at me and says I am lucky to have a steady job because I do not have Leo's creative spark. I grew up in a house where my needs were always second. If Leo wanted new basketball sneakers, I had to wear my old shoes for another year. If Leo wanted to go to summer camp, I had to stay home and help mom with the chores. I never complained. I thought that if I worked hard and stayed quiet, they would eventually see my worth. I thought being the reliable one would earn me respect. I was wrong. It only earned me more work. My personal struggle has always been trying to find my voice in a room full of people who only want to hear their own. I wanted to be more than just a daughter who pays for things. I wanted to be seen. The contrast between us is sharp. Leo is flashy and loud. He drives a leased car he can't afford and wears watches that cost more than my rent. He is glamorous in the eyes of our cousins and aunts. I am the boring one in the cardigan who brings the potato salad. But I had something they didn't expect. My job taught me how to follow a paper trail. It taught me how to find things that people tried to hide. I know how to look at a bank statement and see the lies between the lines. I know how to find deleted emails and hidden transfers. My family saw a quiet accountant. I saw a group of people who were about to find out that numbers never lie. I have a digital trail of every cent they ever stole. I have been watching the bank accounts for months. I knew the money was moving. I just waited for them to admit it to my face. If you have ever felt like your family only values you for what you can give them, hit that subscribe button right now. I want to hear your story in the comments. I am reading every single one. You are not alone in this feeling. Let us prove them wrong together. Click hype if you are ready to see how I took back what was mine. I stood in the kitchen for a long time after the dinner guests left. The smell of roasted chicken and rosemary still hung in the air, but it felt heavy and stale. I looked at the bank book again. The paper was crisp and the blue ink from the teller's stamp was still bright. It showed a balance of 0. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the winter air outside. That money was not just a number on a page. It was 10 years of missed school plays and late nights. It was the promise I made to my father on the day he died. He had held my hand and whispered that I needed to make sure Maya was taken care of. He knew my mother was impulsive. He knew Leo was a dreamer who never woke up. That trust was supposed to be the one thing they could not touch. I had been so careful. I checked the balance every month. I never thought my own mother would find a way inside. I walked into the living room where my mother was sipping tea. She looked so peaceful, like she had not just robbed her own granddaughter of her future. Leo was slumped on the sofa, scrolling through his phone and laughing at a video. I asked her how she got access. I asked her how she could just take $50,000 without talking to me first. She did not even look up from her cup. She told me that the money was sitting there doing nothing, while Leo had a brilliant idea. She said that a college degree can be earned at any age, but a business opportunity like this only comes once. Leo chimed in without looking away from his screen. He told me that I was being dramatic. He said that once his startup took off, he would pay me back 10 times over. He called it an investment in the family brand. He said that Maya would thank him later when she was riding in a private jet instead of a city bus. I told them that the law does not care about family brands. I told them that the money belonged to a child and that taking it was theft. That was when the room went quiet. Leo sat up and his face turned red. He started shouting about how much he had sacrificed for this family. He said that he was the one who kept everyone entertained and happy, while I sat in my office, counting other people's money. He told me that I was a bitter person who did not want to see him succeed. He said that it was not like Maya was a genius anyway. He told me she would probably just get married and be a housewife, so she did not need a fancy education. He told me to let the men handle the big money and go back to my spreadsheets. I could not believe the words coming out of his mouth. He was talking about a 10-year-old girl like she was already a failure. I turned to my mother and told her I would call the police if the money was not back in the account by Monday morning. I thought that would scare her. I thought she would realize she had gone too far. Instead, she stood up and walked to the sideboard. She pulled out a legal folder and tossed it onto the coffee table. She told me that I was a liar. She said that I had signed the papers myself months ago. I opened the folder and saw a document titled Gift Deed. It stated that I, Vanessa, was voluntarily gifting the entirety of the trust fund to my mother to use at her discretion. At the bottom of the page, there was a signature. It looked exactly like mine. The loops of the V and the sharp cross of the T were perfect, but I knew I had never seen that paper in my life. I had never signed anything. She had forged my name. She had studied my handwriting and stolen my identity to make her crime look like a gift. I felt like I could not breathe. My own mother had sat at her desk and practiced my signature just so she could take my money. She looked me in the eye and told me that I must have forgotten signing it during the holidays. She said I was probably stressed and did not read what I was putting my name on. She was gaslighting me in my own house. I told her that this would not hold up in court. I told her that a forensic accountant knows exactly how to prove a forgery. Leo laughed at that. He said that no one would believe a daughter who was suing her own mother. He said I would look like a monster. Before I could say another word, my phone started buzzing in my pocket. It was not just one text. It was a flood of them. I pulled it out and saw that my mother had sent a message to the entire extended family group chat. She had included my aunts, my uncles, and all of our cousins. She wrote that I was having a mental breakdown and was threatening to send her to jail over a misunderstanding. She said that I was greedy and that I hated seeing my brother succeed. She told everyone that I was attacking her and that she was afraid for her safety. The replies started coming in immediately. My Aunt Sarah wrote that I should be ashamed of myself. My cousin Ben said that I always thought I was better than everyone else because of my job. They were all turning against me without even asking for my side of the story. They were calling me a villain in front of the people I had known my whole life. I looked at my mother, and she had a tiny, triumphant smile on her lips. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was making me an outcast so that I would be too ashamed to fight back. She thought that the social pressure would break me. She thought that I would value the family's opinion more than my daughter's future. I stood there in the middle of the room while the world I knew crumbled around me. I could hear the pings of the phone notifications like little hammers. I looked at Leo, who was already back to his video, and at my mother, who was calmly finishing her tea. They thought they had trapped me. They thought that a forged signature and a group chat were enough to stop me. But they forgot one thing. They forgot that I have spent my entire career finding people who think they are smarter than the system. They forgot that I know how to look past the surface of a document to find the truth underneath. I did not scream. I did not cry. I just picked up my coat and my daughter's hand and walked out the door. I knew that the next time we spoke, it would not be over a dinner table. It would be in a place where lies have consequences. I had work to do, and I was going to make sure every single one of those wire transfers was accounted for. The days following that dinner were the longest of my life. I went through the motions of my job and my life with a heavy weight in my stomach. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt a jolt of anxiety. The family group chat was a constant stream of insults and lies. My cousins, who I used to babysit, were now calling me a thief. My aunts, who I had helped with their taxes for free, were saying I was a disappointment to my father's memory. It was a cold and lonely feeling to realize that years of loyalty could be erased by one well-placed lie from my mother. I tried to focus on my daughter, Maya. I did not want her to see how much I was hurting. I kept our house quiet and calm, but inside I was a storm of anger and betrayal. The first real blow came on a Tuesday afternoon. I had a few hours off work, and I decided to go to the storage unit. I wanted to get Maya's old baby clothes and the journals my father had kept for her. I needed to feel close to something that had not been tainted by my mother's greed. I drove to the facility and parked my car. The smell of cold concrete and old metal always reminded me of the weekends I spent helping my father organize his tools. I walked up to our unit, but my key would not turn. I thought maybe the lock was frozen, so I tried again and again. Then I noticed that the lock was different. It was a shiny new padlock that did not belong to me. I called the front office, and the manager told me that my mother had come in that morning. She told them I had lost my keys and she wanted the lock changed. She also told them I was not allowed to access the unit anymore. I stood there in the cold hallway and felt like I was going to explode. Those were my things. Those were the only memories I had left of a time when my family felt like a home. I called my mother immediately. She answered on the first ring with a voice that was sweet and sharp at the same time. She told me that she was protecting the family history from my bitter hands. She said that if I wanted my daughter's things back, I had to come to her and apologize. She said I had to tell the whole family that I was wrong about the money. She was holding my heart hostage to save her own skin. I hung up the phone without saying a word. I knew then that there was no bottom to what she would do. 2 days later, the betrayal followed me to my place of work. I was in the middle of a complex audit for a new client. The office was quiet and everyone was focused on their screens. Suddenly, I heard a loud voice in the lobby. I knew that voice. It was Leo. He was not just talking, he was shouting. He was calling for the manager. He was telling everyone who would listen that his sister was a fraud. He said that I was using my skills as an accountant to steal money from my elderly mother. He said that if I was willing to rob my own family, I was probably robbing the firm too. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I walked out to the lobby and saw Leo standing there in his expensive jacket. He looked proud of himself. My coworkers were standing at their desks and staring. My boss, Mr. Henderson, came out of his office with a look of deep concern. Leo did not stop. He pointed a finger at me and told Mr. Henderson that I was a dangerous person. He said that the family was considering legal action against me. I tried to speak, but the words felt stuck in my throat. I looked at the faces of my colleagues and saw doubt. They knew me, but Leo was being so loud and so confident that they did not know what to believe. Mr. Henderson asked me to come into his office and asked Leo to leave. Leo walked out with a smirk, throwing a wink over his shoulder like this was all a big joke to him. In the office, I had to explain my family drama to my boss. It was the most humiliating moment of my professional life. I had to tell him that my mother forged my signature. I had to tell him that my brother was a failing entrepreneur who was desperate for cash. Mr. Henderson was kind, but he told me that I needed to handle my personal business quickly. He said that the firm could not have this kind of drama in the lobby. I felt like I was losing everything. My reputation was being shredded by the people who were supposed to protect it. The final straw happened at my cousin Chloe's graduation party. I did not want to go, but Maya wanted to see her cousins. I thought maybe, in a public place, they would be civil. I was wrong. The party was held in a large hall that smelled like cheap perfume and floor wax. When we walked in, the room went quiet. People looked at us and then looked away. It was like we were invisible or infected. We sat at a table in the very back, near the kitchen. I could hear the clattering of dishes and the smell of garbage from the back door. My mother stood up to give a toast. She spent 10 minutes talking about how proud she was of Chloe. Then she turned the conversation to Leo. She called him the favorite of the family. She said he was the one they always praised because he had the courage to follow his dreams. She talked about his new startup like it was a global success already. She looked directly at me and said that it was a shame when some people chose greed over family support. She said that a family is only as strong as its most loyal member, and clearly some of us had forgotten what loyalty meant. Everyone cheered for Leo. No one looked at me. Maya asked why Grandma was being mean, and I had to lie to her. I told her that Grandma was just tired. My heart broke for my daughter in that moment. She did not deserve to be treated like an outsider by her own blood. But as I sat in that dark corner, a cold sort of peace came over me. I realized that they thought they had already won. They thought they had broken my spirit and my reputation. They were so busy celebrating their theft that they were not paying attention to me anymore. They thought I was just a sad, quiet girl who was defeated. That was their biggest mistake. I am a forensic accountant. I do not get angry. I get even. I do not yell. I find the proof. Every night after that party, I stayed up until the sun started to peek through the curtains. I drank cup after cup of black coffee. The sound of the clock ticking on the wall was the only thing louder than my own heartbeat. I was not crying anymore. I was working. I was documenting every single interaction. I saved every text message from the group chat. I recorded the phone calls where my mother threatened to keep Maya's things forever. I spent hours at my computer, diving deep into the bank records I had access to. I looked at the server metadata for the digital files my mother had sent. I found the traces of the copy and paste job she did on my signature. I found the IP addresses from when Leo accessed the trust account using a password he must have stolen from my father's old computer. I was building a digital cage bar by bar. I felt a strange sense of power as the spreadsheets grew. I could see the path the money took. I could see Leo spending it at high-end restaurants and clothing stores. I could see my mother moving funds to hide them from the audit I knew was coming. They thought they were being clever, but they were leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that a child could follow. I was no longer the reliable daughter who paid for dinner. I was the hunter. I was gathering every piece of evidence until I had a mountain of truth that they could never climb over. They were laughing now, but I knew that soon, the only sound in the room would be the sound of their lies catching up to them. I was ready. I stopped crying weeks ago. Now I just work. The nights in my home office are silent except for the steady hum of my computer tower and the clicking of my keyboard. The air in the room is always cool and smells like the peppermint tea I drink to stay awake. I do not feel like a victim anymore. I feel like a predator. I spend hours staring at the screen until the numbers begin to dance. I am looking at bank server metadata that most people do not even know exists. Every time a digital document is edited, it leaves a fingerprint. My mother thought she was being clever when she used a PDF editor to move my signature. She thought that once the file was saved, the history was gone. She was wrong. I found the hidden layers in the file she used for the gift deed. I could see the exact date and time the signature was lifted from an old birthday card I sent her 3 years ago. I could see the IP address of the computer used to do it. It was the laptop I bought for Leo 2 Christmases ago. What they did not know was that while they were spending that money, I was building a digital cage around them. I was not just looking at the bank accounts. I was looking for the conversations they had when they thought no one was watching. I am an expert at data recovery. I spent 3 nights digging into the cloud backup of our family's shared computer. I found a folder that had been deleted and then emptied from the trash. It was titled Family Fun. I spent hours running recovery software. When the files finally opened, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air in the room. There were dozens of emails between my mother and Leo. They were not talking about a startup. They were talking about me. In one email, Leo wrote that I was too soft to ever fight back. He said that I was the perfect target because I cared too much about what people thought. My mother replied with a joke. She said that we should bleed her dry now because she would probably just leave everything to a charity anyway. They planned the whole thing. They discussed which documents to forge and how to frame me for tax problems in my father's estate if I ever got too loud. They wanted to make sure that if I did try to go to the police, I would look like the criminal. I saved every single one of those emails. I printed them out and felt the weight of the paper in my hands. It felt like justice. I knew I needed a heavy hitter to help me present this in a way the court could not ignore. I reached out to Mr. Sterling. He was my father's best friend and our family lawyer for 40 years. He retired 2 years ago, but I knew he would take my call. We met in his old office downtown. The space was small and crowded with tall filing cabinets that reached the ceiling. The air smelled like old paper and cedar wood. It was a comforting smell. It reminded me of my father's study. I sat across from Mr. Sterling and handed him the folder. He put on his glasses and started to read. For 20 minutes, the only sound in the room was the turning of pages and the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. His face got darker with every page. When he finished, he looked up at me. His eyes were full of a sadness that made me want to cry, but I held it in. He told me that my father would be heartbroken. He said that he had warned my father that my mother had a streak of greed in her, but my father always wanted to believe the best of people. Mr. Sterling stood up and walked to a safe in the corner of the room. He turned the dial slowly. He pulled out a thick envelope tied with a red string. He told me that when my father set up the trust, he made a physical backup of every single document. He also made a recording of the signing ceremony. In the video, my father clearly states that the money is for Maya, and that under no circumstances should my mother or Leo have access to it. He even explicitly states that my mother is not a trustee. Mr. Sterling had the original, untampered documents that proved the money was never my mother's to touch. He told me he would be honored to represent me pro bono. He said it was the last thing he could do for his old friend. We spent the next few hours building our strategy. Mr. Sterling told me to stay quiet. He told me to let them think they were winning. He said that the more arrogant they became, the more mistakes they would make. I followed his advice. I did not respond to the insults in the group chat. I did not try to call my mother. I let them believe I was defeated. This led to a new level of arrogance from my family. A week later, a formal letter arrived at my house. It was not from a lawyer. It was an invoice created by Leo on his computer. He was charging me for the legal fees they claimed they were incurring because of my harassment. They were demanding $10,000 to cover the costs of the lawyer they claimed they had hired. The letter said that if I did not pay within 30 days, they would take me to court to have my parental rights questioned. They were threatening to take Maya away from me because they said I was mentally unstable. Leo even had the nerve to drive his new car past my house while I was out front. It was a bright red sports car that screamed of stolen money. He honked the horn and waved a stack of cash out the window. He was laughing so hard his face was purple. He thought he was untouchable. He thought that because he had the support of the family and a forged paper, he was the king of the world. My mother started telling the neighbors that I was dangerous. She told them I had a history of stealing from her and that she was only trying to protect what was left of the family legacy. Every time I felt like I was going to break, I looked at the video of my father. I listened to his voice. I looked at the spreadsheets I had built. I knew the truth was a mountain that their lies could not move. I was no longer the reliable daughter. I was a storm that was gathering strength in the dark. I was counting down the days until the hearing. I was ready to show them that being a number cruncher meant I knew exactly how to balance the scales of justice. They thought they were playing a game, but I was the one who knew all the rules. The tension in the family was like a wire pulled too tight. It was about to snap, and I was going to be the one holding the shears. The day of the hearing arrived with a sky that was the color of lead. It was a cold morning in late February. I woke up at 5 and stood by the window with a cup of black coffee. I felt a strange sense of calm. The fear that had lived in my chest for weeks was gone. It had been replaced by a cold and hard resolve. I was not the victim anymore. I was a witness to the truth. I dressed in my best charcoal suit. I wanted to look exactly like what I was, a professional who lived and breathed in a world of facts and figures. I knew that in a few hours, the lies my family had built would be subjected to the heat of the law, and I intended to be the one holding the flame. The courthouse was a grand building made of gray stone that felt like it was designed to make people feel small. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of industrial floor wax and old, burnt coffee. Every footstep echoed against the marble floors like a drumbeat. We were not in a big courtroom with a gallery and a jury. We were in the judge's chambers. It was a smaller room, lined with heavy oak shelves full of law books that reached the ceiling. The room smelled like leather, ink, and old paper. Judge Miller was a man with white hair and eyes that looked like they had seen every lie a human could tell. He sat behind a large mahogany desk that was polished so brightly I could see my own reflection in it. My mother and Leo walked in a few minutes after us. They did not look like people going to a legal hearing. They looked like they were going to a celebration. My mother was wearing a new silk scarf and a coat that I knew she could not afford. She had spent 10 minutes on her hair, and she smelled of expensive lily perfume. Leo was wearing a designer suit that was a little too tight in the shoulders. He looked at me and smirked. He whispered something to Mom, and she let out a small, sharp laugh. They thought this was a formality. They thought the paper they had forged was their shield, and that the group chat they had used to poison the family against me was their sword. Mr. Sterling sat next to me. He was the picture of old-world dignity. He did not look at them. He only looked at his files. The hearing began. The judge asked my mother to explain the nature of the $50,000 transfer from the trust account. She stood up and put on her best performance. She talked about how I had always been such a supportive daughter. She said that I knew how much Leo's dream meant to the family. She claimed that I had come to her in tears on Christmas Eve, offering the money as a gift to help my brother get on his feet. She even pulled out a lace handkerchief and dabbed at her eyes. She said it was a tragedy that I was now trying to take back a gift because of a personal grudge. She lied with the ease of someone who had been doing it her entire life. Leo spoke next. He was loud and confident. He told the judge that the money had already been invested into his company's infrastructure. He spoke about servers and marketing teams and global reach. He said that pulling the money out now would ruin him and the dozens of people he claimed to employ. He called me unstable. He said I had been acting erratic since my father died and that I was trying to control the family through finances. He looked the judge in the eye and told him that I was the one who had suggested the gift deed in the first place. He was so convincing that for a second, I wondered if he actually believed his own lies. The judge turned to me. He asked if I had anything to say. I did not stand up. I stayed in my chair and looked at the files on the table. I spoke in a voice that was low, steady, and cold. I told the judge that I was a forensic accountant. I told him that my job was to find the story that the numbers were trying to tell. I handed a tablet to the court clerk to be shown on the monitors in the room. First, I showed the metadata from the gift deed. I explained how a digital file is like a timeline that cannot be erased easily. I showed the judge the exact moment the signature was copied from a PDF of a birthday card I had sent my mother 3 years ago. I showed the layers of the file on the screen. It was clear to see where the signature had been pasted over the original text. I showed the IP address of the computer used to create the document. It was the laptop I had bought for Leo. I could see the color draining from my mother's face as I spoke. The silence in the room became heavy. The only sound was the low hum of the heater in the corner and the ticking of a small clock on the judge's desk. Then, I presented the bank records. This was the part they did not expect. I showed the court that the $50,000 had been wired out of the trust account on the 14th of the month. Then, I pointed to the date on the forged gift deed. It was dated the 16th. I asked the judge why the money was moved 2 days before the document that supposedly authorized the transfer even existed. My mother's eyes went wide. She looked at Leo, but he was looking at the ceiling, his jaw tight. The judge looked at the dates on the screen. He looked at them for a long time, then he looked at Leo. The judge asked him to explain the discrepancy. Leo's confidence vanished in an instant. He started to stutter. He tried to say that the bank must have made a mistake with the timestamps. He said that the digital files were not reliable. The judge leaned forward and told him to stop talking. He turned to my mother and asked her if she had actually seen me sign the paper. My mother started to tremble. She tried to say yes, but the word got caught in her throat. Leo suddenly stood up and started shouting. He did not shout at me. He shouted at our mother. He said that she had told him she had handled the paperwork. He said it was not his fault if she was sloppy and could not even get a date right. He called her an idiot in front of the judge and the lawyers. My mother looked up at him with a look of pure shock. She had spent her whole life protecting him, giving him everything she had, and he was throwing her to the wolves the moment things got difficult. She realized in that moment that her favorite child was willing to let her go to prison just to save himself. The judge hammered his hand on the desk. He told Leo to sit down, or he would be removed by the bailiff. He said he had seen enough evidence to move forward with a criminal referral. He told my mother that forgery and perjury were serious crimes that carried jail time. He told Leo that his business accounts were to be frozen immediately to prevent any further theft. He ordered a full audit of every cent that had been moved from my father's estate in the last 5 years. My mother started to sob, a loud and ugly sound that filled the small room. But there was no lace handkerchief now. She realized she was facing a reality she could not talk her way out of. I looked at them and felt nothing. No joy. No sadness, just the quiet satisfaction of a job well done. The digital cage was closed. The numbers had told their story, and for the first time in my life, my family was forced to listen. They had underestimated the boring accountant, and it had cost them everything. I walked out of the courthouse, and the air felt fresh for the first time in months. The heavy lead sky had broken, and a thin line of pale yellow sunlight was hitting the pavement. I took a deep breath. The scent of rain and wet stone was everywhere. I felt lighter than I had in years. I had a court order in my hand. It was a piece of paper that carried more weight than any lie my mother could ever tell. It mandated the immediate return of every cent of the $50,000, plus interest and legal fees. The money was going to come from the sale of Leo's assets. His startup was a fraud, just like him. His new car, his designer suits, and his electronics were all going to be seized to pay back the trust. Leo was forced into bankruptcy within a month of the hearing. Without the trust fund to float his lifestyle, he had nothing. He tried to call me a dozen times, begging for a loan to get him through the transition. I did not answer. I blocked his number. I realized that helping him was just another way of hurting myself. He had to learn what it felt like to work for something. My mother was given a suspended sentence because of her age and the fact that she had no prior record. But the judge made her pay a massive fine and placed her on probation. More than that, she lost the only child who actually cared for her. She had chosen the favorite, and in return, he had blamed her for everything in open court. The family group chat went silent after the hearing. A few aunts tried to reach out and apologize, saying they were misled. I did not reply to them either. If they could believe a lie so easily, they did not deserve my truth. I moved my daughter's keepsakes out of that storage unit and into our new home. We are starting over now in a place where the air doesn't feel heavy with secrets. Maya has her college fund back. It is locked in a new trust that only I and Mr. Sterling can access. She is going to be an engineer, and she is going to have the future my father wanted for her. I am no longer the reliable one who fixes everyone's mistakes. I am the woman who protected her child and herself. I am the woman who knows her worth. They thought they could steal my daughter's future because I was just an accountant. They thought a quiet life meant a weak spirit. They forgot that accountants are the ones who know exactly where the bodies are buried. They forgot that I have been watching the numbers my whole life. I am finally free of the burden of their expectations. I am finally living for myself and for my daughter. Has a family member ever tried to gaslight you into thinking your hard-earned success belonged to them? Share your story in the comments. I am reading every single one to make sure we all stay protected. Your boundaries are worth more than their greed. Do not let anyone tell you that you owe them your future just because you share a last name. Click hype to help this story reach others who need it. Your voice matters, and your story deserves to be told. Thanks for spending your time with me today. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more people getting the justice they deserve, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. It really helps the channel grow and allows me to keep sharing these stories with you. I want to build a community where we support each other and stand up for what is right. I will see you in the next one. Stay strong out there, and remember that the truth is always worth fighting for.